Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Rates and Lanes Podcast. I'm your host, Rico Muhammad. Going to be joining me tonight, my co-host, Mr. Chuck Snow, and Mr. Rick Gobbell, safety and compliance expert extraordinaire. And tonight we are going to talk mostly everything safety and compliance. If you have a question pertaining to hours of service, proper use of personal conveyance, which is a big one that everybody has seemed to be taking the headlines here lately. The use of personal conveyance or the improper use thereof, I should say, of personal conveyance. So if you got a question and you want to get in, you can drop it down in the chat if you're looking at us live, or if you're looking at a rebroadcast. By all means, share, like, and subscribe to the channel. But without any further ado, I'm going to welcome my co-host Chuck Snow and our guest Rick Gobbell to this program this evening. Good evening, gentlemen.
Hey Rico, how you doing? Rick, thanks for joining us. It's always a pleasure having you on. You know, there's not too many of us old timers left that remember where you got your some of your start at the Interstate Commerce Commission. You talk to young guys about the ICC, and they kind of look at you and they go, "You mean the bumper on the back of the trailer?" But there was a time when the ICC, the Interstate Commerce Commission, ruled the land with an iron fist.
Some of the guys that worked for the Interstate Commerce Commission when it had safety jurisdiction.
Right.
The DOT didn't have safety jurisdiction until 1967. Prior to that, the Interstate Commerce Commission had safety jurisdiction, what safety regulations were out there. And they had, I believe they had black cars with white hoods. It's either white hoods or white cars and black hoods. I can't remember, black hood and a black top. I never saw one of them. I just know that them old guys talked about them when they did it. And they actually checked trucks, and that was before all this mix-up and all the states got into checking trucks. Songs, ICC checking on down the line,
Yeah.
that goes back to those days. And, I guess, I always look back and say those are the glory by any means. But I was blessed to have been able to work with some of those guys that actually were what they call safety investigators, I believe is what the ICC. They had two types. They had district supervisors and they had safety. Well, the safety investigators were grade 9s and the district supervisors were grade 12s.
Right.
Now, when I went to work for the Interstate Commerce Commission in 1972, then the safety regulations had been moved to the United States Department of Administration. I had a show recently with Dave Nemo of the regulations and where they started and how they started and where they started and the safety regulations, and they've evolved, and they continue to evolve. But I can tell you kind of generally, the Interstate Commerce Act was sometime around 1935. That's when the federal government, through the Commerce Clause of the decided it could regulate. They'd already began to regulate railroads in 1885 or something like that. And then they started regulating trucks in 1935. My granddaddy actually received, when they started regulating trucks in 35, then they grandfathered in people who were already trucking and gave them some authority. Well, my granddaddy had two old trucks, and they would run livestock from down our home, Waynesboro, Tennessee, to Nashville, to the sale barns up there and the slaughterhouses. They'd take cattle and they'd take hogs up there, and when they would deliver the hogs and the cattle to the different slaughterhouses and markets up there. Then they would take shovels and shovel out the manure in the stake bed trucks. They were straight trucks, end down, and they would load what they freight. They'd go around to each railroad terminal, and they would load any freight going back to Lawrenceburg, Waynesburg, or Savannah, Tennessee. It's about 100 Waynesburg to Nashville. The only paved road they got to Columbia, Tennessee. Everything else was unimproved roads, dirt roads, some gravel roads.
That was real trucking.
About 30 miles an hour, about what they could average going up, if they didn't get stuck or something, water hole. I thought that was interesting. My granddad couldn't make no money. Depression hit him in 40, 41, 42, somewhere. Where'd the depression? I don't know, 36, I don't know. It did, and that pretty well, there wasn't no money in it. So he went to logging, using those trucks to log, and about 46. So anyway, that's kind of the history of commission. Then in 2000, it went from the Federal Highway Administration, which was a new agency created by Congress. I was there then, and we never saw any difference. Our paychecks, nothing changed. It just had a little bit, So that's what we did, and that's kind of where involved. But you're exactly right, Chuck and Rico, that changes, and this goes back. This personal conveyance, when it went to ELD, then your man just couldn't ride anymore. He was PC or anything, because that ELD is track slug. If you ever see a slug across your sidewalk, you can track it. So they know exactly where that truck is, to try to give drivers some proper conveyance. Then the agency, Federal Register, the guidance conveyance was. Now, a lot of people are pretty far, and they continue to do that. And I have clients that do that. They stretch it. It's like my daddy. My dad was an owner operator from McLean, retired from McLean. He gets something in his mind, and you couldn't about things. And just I get
things are a lot different. I got to tell you, things are a whole lot different now than it was back then. Back then, when your dad was doing it, it was probably in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. The cost, to doing these things, if you got caught, was a ticket. Today, my God, it affects your insurance. And they can really dig deep if you're fooling around and using personal conveyance when you shouldn't be. And that's where all these guys are getting themselves into hot water unnecessarily.
Well, we might have lost Rick for a second. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're having a little bit of a technical difficulty. Rick is having to use his cell phone because he was trying to use his computer a little earlier, but not sure if the computer was not, for whatever reason, was not syncing up, and the audio was not coming through. But looked like we might have lost. I don't know. He's trying to work it to try to get back on. But yeah, so we're having some problems with that. So we want to try to get some information. We want to try to see if we can get him back on to get some information as to how you can properly use the hours of service and the personal conveyance, so that you can avoid these little misnomers and mishaps when you're dealing with the DOT if you happen to get inspected. And we wanted to try to get into some other things too. If we can get Rick back on, that'll be great. But if not, I had a phone call earlier this week with a gentleman that was just starting out. He had jumped in and started doing a lease purchase, and he didn't quite understand all the nuances and the ins and outs of what he was getting himself involved in. And the best advice that I could try to give him at that time was for him to slow down. He was spending a lot of money on fuel. he had signed this contract. It's kind of crazy. The contract is supposed to be some type of he gets to renew it at 6 months after he's been in it. He's already been in it for 3 months. So we're going to try our best way to try to get him to see his way through the contract that he's on, and get him back to. Let's see. There you go, Rick. Can you hear us?
Can you hear us?
Uh-oh.
But I just now see we got bad connection tonight.
There you go. We got you coming in a little bit there.
Let me get on
This is pretty low. This is pretty face.
connection. Let me talk a little bit about. Didn't hear you guys.
Go ahead, Rick.
Okay, let's talk about the conveyance. And they gave us in the some examples of appropriate use of duty to perform personal not limited to this, but generally it's time drivers in route lodge, hotel, or truck stop to rest facilities and back to the lot. What we're talking about here in casinos, you'll see traffic. Let's say the guy.
Uh-oh.
Oh, not coming in. Rick, we're losing you, buddy. You're breaking up.
Yeah, I think it looks like his internet connection might be a bad internet connection. But well, I apologize, Legion. What we have to do is we try and let's see. Looks like it might be coming back in. It's
I hope so, because this is a very, this is a
Yeah.
really important thing, this personal conveyance, because I'm getting a lot of information from people saying they're getting busted all the time for misuse of personal conveyance. It's almost to the point where it would be better if they didn't have the damn thing.
Well, one thing that people have to realize is that it's not just you just can't use it all willy-nilly. You have to, from what I understand of the rule, is that once you go off of personal conveyance, say if you went off of personal conveyance in Atlanta, Georgia, well, you can't come back on duty and go back on duty in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Right.
You got to pick back up. Let's see if we can get Rick. We got him. We got. Let's try it again, Rick.
Can you hear us?
Let's try it again, Rick. Can you hear us?
Yeah, but you're breaking up. You're breaking up, Rico.
Oh, you sound good though.
You sound good, Rick.
All right, let me. You can hear me now,
Yes, sir.
Beautiful.
You're coming in loud and clear.
Rico.
You coming in loud and clear. I don't know if you can hear us, but we can hear you.
I'm coming in. Okay.
So,
All right, let me continue. Let's assume that
Well, we had him for a second.
frustrating.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes,
beautiful.
sir.
What I was saying. You were talking about
No,
the
breaking up again.
Yeah. Yeah, it's bad. I would say try and see if we could call Rick, but then I think we're going to have a bad
We get feedback. I tried that
bad
once.
feedback. Yeah, we're gonna have real bad feedback if we tried it that way.
I just heard you, Rico. Call me when.
I don't think we're gonna be able to do it that way, Rick. We'll give it a shot. We'll give it a shot.
This way, you mean?
Yes.
Now, I'm gonna try to give you a call. Let me see if I can do it.
Okay.
But we're gonna try it this way.
Okay, I got you.
All right. Is there feedback, Chuck? Do you hear any bad feedback?
So far, so good. Little
Which
bit.
one you hear me? I can hear you on the phone. Which phone? I can see you right now on the streaming.
Yeah, I didn't want to put you on the screen because I think you're gonna create feedback if we put you on the screen.
Well, what about if he puts his mute on?
Yeah. So I'm gonna take you off the screen, Rick, because I think we can hear you. We might be able to hear you better via the telephone.
All right, take me off the screen.
Okay,
all right.
That's much better. That works.
Yeah, that's much better. I think we can hear you now.
Okay, Rick, when can people use personal?
My screen because get feedback. All right, now let's go.
All right. So can you hear Chuck?
I hear you.
Okay, when can our listeners legally use personal conveyance? Because we got to settle this one again because people are getting busted left and right.
All right, let me start all over with personal conveyance, okay? Hear me, guys?
Yes, sir.
All right. Personal conveyance. A driver may record time operating a CMV for personal conveyance, that is, for personal use or reasons, as off-duty when the driver is relieved from work and all responsibility of performing work. That's the key words right there. And then examples of appropriate use of CMV while off-duty for personal conveyance includes, but not limited to, time spent traveling from a driver's en-route lodging, such as a motel or truck stop, to restaurants and entertainment facilities and back to the lodging. So what they're saying is, if you're staying if you plan on spending the night in St. Louis in a motel, and in a truck stop or a motel, then you want to go over to somewhere for some kind of entertainment. Let's just use gambling, for example, because we see a lot of trucks at gambling facilities.
Right.
That's okay for the driver to drive his truck to the gambling facility as long as he goes back to the truck stop. That's personal conveyance. And that comes from the old freight line rules of where a driver has to lay over at a terminal,
Right.
take his truck, go eat, come back to the terminal for a load tomorrow. That's where that is. Another example is commuting from the last location where on-duty activity occurred to the driver's permanent residence and back to the last on-duty location. So what they're saying is, let's say that you go into a terminal in St. Louis, your terminal in St. Louis, and you want to go home for a day or two. That's okay as long as you come back to that terminal.
But you can't leave. But you can't leave. If you could take the truck and trailer home, let's just say you lived south of St. Louis, 50 miles, and you were heading down to Memphis. So if you went home to your house and then left your house, which is 50 miles south of St. Louis, and started heading down to Memphis, you would be breaking the law, correct?
If you use your truck to enhance your movement, so if you're in St. Louis, and let's say that you live 50 miles south of St. Louis, you're going to Memphis, and you drive your truck from St. Louis to your home, what is that, down there, Haytime, Missouri, somewhere?
Right.
Somewhere down in there, 50 miles or run I used to work on when I was a real foot packing a couple years ago. We went up there, and I can't think of the name of that town, Flat River, Missouri.
Okay.
We was getting close to St. Louis. But if you leave and you're going to Memphis with a load and you drive from St. Louis down to Flat River, then from Flat River south to Memphis, that's not personal conveyance. That's enhancing your move.
Yep.
Okay.
That's where the drivers are getting in trouble. And they call me, we NASTC now, we have I think I saw the other day, we have 19,000 members of NASTC now. And I take their calls. I serve as a consultant for them. But they called me and they said, well, I just kind of going home. I said, well, was home toward where you were going to unload or to load? Well, yeah, but I thought I could do that because it says I can go home. No, it doesn't say that. And it says that you can't enhance your move. And I use the example a lot when I'm talking and training in hours of service. I use the example of my dad when he was an owner-operator for McLean. Then he might go to Memphis and unload on Friday. Well, if he could leave Memphis and come to our home, which was 100 miles east of Memphis, and spend a weekend, but he had to go back to Memphis to use personal conveyance.
Right.
So he couldn't load in Memphis, then come to our home in Waynesboro, spend a weekend, then go to Philadelphia. That's more or less en route to Philadelphia, and you cannot enhance your movements, and that's where we get in trouble. Then I get the calls from the cattle haulers. Well, I go out here and I unload in Delhart, Texas. I've got to get back to Montgomery, Alabama, so I PC back to Montgomery, Alabama.
Right.
You can't do that, Slick. No,
But people are, and that's where people are doing a lot of stupid stuff on personal conveyance, and that's where they're getting into trouble. And they think, and one thing I want to say is, people get something in their head and it's wrong, and they think that because they're doing it, it's right. And that's how they're getting into big doo-doo for no reason.
Well, that's what I said about my dad. He gets something in his head, and I used to, me and him kind of have some discussions about things. And Dad said, well, you don't know what you're talking about. I said, Dad, I'm a USDOT man. We're doing it wrong. And he'd say, well, I don't believe it. And I said, okay, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I tell this story on sometime. We got in an argument there one time. Not an argument, a family discussion. And Dad said, that's what he said. He said, you don't know what you're talking about. So I'll tell you what I'm fixing to do. I'm going to have your butt stopped up there in Columbia, Tennessee. But I'm going to have a state guy stop you. Sit out there and wait for you to come by. I'm going to have him stop you. And I'm going to have him not just write you a ticket. I'm going to have him just take your butt right straight to jail. And he said, when you come home, I'm going to whoop you. I said, Daddy, I'm 40 years old. You're not going to whip me. Mama said, the only one going to do any whooping around here is going to be me, and I'm going to whoop you both if you don't quit this.
Get y'all in line.
We had fun. We had those fun. I'd go out there in Daddy's truck, be sitting out there in the driveway. Well, I'd walk around it. Hey, what are you doing? Checking my truck? Yeah, I'm trying to get put out of service somewhere, Daddy. Good gracious. You leave my truck alone. Well, we had those years, we enjoyed it. I think he enjoyed it. One thing he always would do, if he got stopped somewhere, some Tennessee trooper stopped him or something, tried to inspect the person. He come out of that truck. He said, Ricky Gobbell? He said, that's my boy.
It's amazing how that card works.
Well, Rick,
I told him he better quit doing that because I'm going to tell one of them to arrest him. The next time he says that, I'm going to have him arrested. So, because everyone with them troopers say, I saw your dad today. Boy, he come out of that truck telling me he's your daddy. I said, why don't you just go ahead and arrest him?
So, Rick, what is I know we have the little safety checks that's become do you have any dates for the next ones that's coming down the pipe?
The regulations?
The dates with like the safety checks or the break weeks or anything like that.
I participated in things for 30 years. I never thought the mountie did anything. We used to have to go out there like a National Road Check Week, and that's when we had to make sure the state guys were out there checking as many trucks. We'd go out there and check as many trucks. We'd have to get counts every day of how many trucks we checked. We had to send it to Washington, how many's put out of service and all that stuff. But you know what? They didn't work no harder that day than they did any other day. And I just don't have a lot of credibility for that. They publicize it, have National Brake Week, Brake Check Week. They do they talk about it a lot, but at the end of the day, they don't check many more trucks than they do any other time. So I guess I'm a naysayer about that. We're out there every day checking trucks. We spend almost $500 million a year, FMCSA does, to get these state folks. Because I think everybody doesn't understand that these roadside inspections conducted by state officers, that's not the United States Department of Transportation. That's state officers who've adopted the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations and state laws that are doing these inspections and being paid by FMCSA to do them. Now, it ain't like I get so much per inspection, but like when I was division administrator in Tennessee, I funded the Tennessee Highway Patrol about $14 million a year to do truck inspections. I bought the uniforms, I bought the cars, I funded scale sites. I did everything for them to fund them so they'd get all these inspections so they could send these inspections into Washington. And at that time, it was SafeStat, and now it's CVSA SMS. And, of course, the government spent an awful lot of time trying to figure out how to use CSA SMS data to accurately to detect a motor carrier that poses a higher risk to having a crash than other motor carriers. We fought that thing. You no longer see it for public display, the CSA SMS scores, but there's people out there that sell it bitch load. A lot of them sell that data every day to brokers, and that's why he has so much trouble. It is not good data. It does not accurately reflect a carrier's risk of being involved in a crash. Anybody that says that simply never took statistics. Unfortunately, I took statistics, had to take a year of it in college, and it's junk science what they're using. I've said that 100 times. And I'm not saying it's bad to do what they're doing. What I'm saying is it's bad to try to take that data and say you have a high risk of being involved in a crash, and therefore we're going to dedicate our resources. We're going to put you out there as inspect on the ISS score. We're going to identify you as a possible high-risk carrier for intervention. We're going to send auditors out there to audit you and try to rate you less than satisfactory and try to penalize you. And when you start talking about 1.3 million trucking companies that we have now in the United States of America, and you start talking about 150,000 crashes by that 1.3 million trucking companies, you start to get statistically it's not valid. It's statistically invalid data, because out of that 150,000 crashes we have a year in the United States by trucking companies, 75% of them are not our fault.
Right.
Well, the FMCSA does not know which crashes are at fault, which ones are not. They don't get that information. They just calculate them all. So when you start calculating them all, and you find out that, and they know this is not my data, this is American Trucking Association data, you're talking about 30 or 40,000 of those crashes a year are our trucking company's fault. Now, divide 1.3 million into 40,000, and you get such a statistically small number that it's invalid. And they never say, the University of Michigan did this study for them. Of course, the agency paid Michigan. Michigan give them what they wanted. They said, you're 3 times more than likely to be involved in a crash if you have these violations during roadside inspections, and if you had these crashes. When you start talking about trucking companies with less than 10 trucks, it takes very few crashes to give you a high score in Crash Basic. And if you look now at hours of service basic, it just takes almost nothing to get you a high score in our service basic, because with ELDs they're finding so few violations. And once they do that, they put this data together and they measure it over a bell curve, then you get these carriers that, you got a terrible hours of service violation. Well, 4 of them was I didn't have the instructions how to use my ELD. I didn't have extra paper logs. That's the biggest part of them right there. That's the 2 biggest violations that you see now. Now, if you get a false log for improperly using CVSA, oh man, now you are spiked. And then now here comes FMCSA. They're in there trying to shut you down. They're trying to do all this stuff to you, and maybe you've never had a crash. And it's frustrating to me that the agency is playing with data. It's kind of like they're playing with data that's like a lost ball in high weeds. They don't know what to do. And when you start talking about, well, if you have a crash, let's say that you got a 0.003 chance of having a crash. Well, if you have a 0.009, you're 3 times more likely. But that's such small numbers. And when you take a small 10 or less truck operator, 2 crashes, well, they don't know it's his fault or not, because they don't get the crash reports. They only get 50 data elements telling them who the carrier was, how many injuries there were, who the driver was, CDL numbers. I worked on that, helped set it up. It just frustrates me that our government still trying. They're going to try again this year to revise CVSA. What is it?
CSA 2010. Yeah.
If I can think about it, they're going to try to revive it and put it back out there this year.
Why? What's the logic behind that?
Well, the logic is they got to do something. When you start spending $500 million a year for data, you got to do something with that data. Congress expects you to do something with it. We'll see where it goes. And I hope that we don't republish CSA SMS data, if I can say it tonight. I hope we don't republish it for public consumption, because it is not valid data. It's just that simple. And you get nothing more dangerous than a government employee with nothing to do.
Very true.
Because they're going to find something to do. It's like these 87,000 new IRS agents we're bringing on. 87,000. Now, when you get 87,000 people out there, we're only going to deal with those people making $400,000 a year or more. That's okay. That'd probably be right for a year or two. When we had about 100 safety investigators nationwide when I went to work for Federal Highway at the time, we hired, all of a sudden one time, Congress gave us some money, we hired 200 new safety investigators. Well, when you get 200, when you triple your staff, you got to find something for them people to do. So that's why I say there's nothing more dangerous than a federal employee with nothing to do, because they'll go out there and they'll find something to do. I did the same thing. And when I was in Jackson, Tennessee for 10 years, I had a one-man office there for 10 years. And they lost me for about 10 years. They didn't really know where I was, but I worked. I kept working, man. Because I didn't want them to move me. I was a one-man office in the federal building. To get to my office, you had to walk by Senator Jim Sasser's office. You had to walk by Senator Al Gore's office. You had to walk by Congressman, I can't remember his name now, but to get to my office, you had to walk by 2 senators and congressman's office. And shoot, I was happy, man. I was happy. But then they moved me up in another building, and I was next door to for FBI and IRS. I was upstairs. One about Farmers Home Administration. There was 3 agencies up there. But anyway, I would sometimes they'd see me leave up there. The FBI agent, Jerry Baskin, got to be a good friend of mine. And I started out the door, and I said, Baskin said, yeah. He said, somebody in trouble today? I said, I don't know yet. We'll go out there and see. So that's kind of what we did, you know.
So when I run out of things to do, I had to go find somebody to get in trouble. But that's what we do. That's how it works. And we get these 87,000 new IRS agents. They'll start out working on them high dollar people, but they'll end up down there working on the rest of us. I guarantee it.
So, Rick, let's talk a little bit about. We talked a little bit about. We kind of covered the personal conveyance issue. Let's touch on. I know we touched on it before, but the adverse driving conditions as well.
Right.
Well,
that's the one right there. The agency can't do too much about. If a driver, now you got to understand, the adverse driving condition does not give you any more hours or any more distance travel than you could have normally traveled. So you'll find that, I forget section number 392 point something in there. I can look it up right quick. You used to know all them numbers by heart, you know. But adverse driving condition is once a driver starts out on a trip, he encountered adverse driving conditions, he's entitled to extend his hours, 2 hours to complete a trip that he could normally complete within his hours of service regulations. That's all it is. So if you run into a traffic backup, you know, now I used to get these calls all the time when I was with the agency about a driver, UPS driver, FedEx driver, back in those days, some of the freight line drivers. So they just dispatched me from Nashville or Cincinnati Turner. And it's snowing like crazy up there in Cincinnati. Okay. Well, am I entitled to the 2 additional hours? I don't know. If you get to Cincinnati and hadn't scraped the road, you can't make a trip that you could normally make within the hours of service regulations. You get 2 hours additional, complete that trip. But you can't go any further than that. So if I leave St. Louis and I'm going to Denver, and I get out there and I run out my hours and start snowing, I can't go any further than I could normally go within the 11-hour driving rule, the 14-hour on duty day rule. I don't think they've ever extended the 70-hour rule, but you know, we just don't see hardly any 70-hour rule violations anymore since we did the 34-hour restart.
Right. So now with the adverse driving condition, that's just the trip altogether. It doesn't matter whether or not you're returning home or anything like that. Just you have to be able to complete that trip during the normal regular hours of service. Is that correct?
That's right. Okay. That's right. And you know, they used to say, well, they can't dispatch me on bad weather if they know there's bad weather. Well, you never really know how bad the weather's going to be. You know, you might see on the nightly news that I-70 out there west of Denver is shut down. Well, you don't dispatch people into that. You got to use some common sense, but at the same time, the dispatcher, because let's say the dispatcher dispatched the driver into adverse driving condition, and he knew he did. He could actually be held accountable for that under aiding and abetting if a driver had to go do something. Now, don't go do it and then try to blame it on somebody else. You have to stop. Now, I had a couple one time, and if you look at the regulations, and I don't drag all them out here tonight, but this couple, man, his wife, and they dispatched them into something, bad weather, knew it was bad weather, and the driver got so far, and his wife pulled off, so I'm not going any further. Well, they fired him and her both. And he come up there to see me. I was in Jackson, Tennessee at the time, and nice guy. And he said, this isn't right. And I said, I agree with you, because it's a driver's option to stop when he thinks it's hazardous to drive.
Right, of course.
Right. You're supposed to be the captain of that ship.
That's
yeah,
right.
He's out there.
Make that decision. If they disciplinary you for it, then you've got some sort of case. But I'm gonna tell you, you're gonna have a gray beard before you get that case settled. So you got to try to work through those things with your employer, because these cases of trying to sue the company that fired you. And then, of course, you know, now with so much data out there, sometimes it's hard to find a job if you've been fired from one, because they put it on what is it now, those different sites out there, and it's tough. I mean, it's just you're gonna be old and gray before you get a settlement. It's kind of like I told a guy one time when I was the governor. I got tired of finding them, and I found them 3 or 4 times. And that's back when we couldn't shut them down. But I finally called the guy. I said, "You need to come see me." That's when I was division administrator, because I wasn't finding them. My staff was going there and doing audits on them, and I'd almost tell you his name, but I don't want to. But when I first knew him, he had 6 trucks. When he sold his company, he had 7,000.
What?
Anyway, we were having to go down there regularly and audit them. We'd find them. So anyway, I called him. I said, "You come up here and see me." He's in Memphis. I said, "You come up here and see me." He said, "What about it?" I said, "I'm not going to tell you. You get here. If you don't come see me, now I'm fixing to send 4 or 5 people in there, stay 2 or 3 weeks. But, you come on up here, me and you're going to have a little talk." So what I told him is, I said, "Look, you're going to run out of money before I run out of ink. I guarantee And I told him that with a straight face without ever even smiling. Never broke eye contact. He said, "You serious?" I said, "I'm dead serious." I said, "We got to quit doing this. We got to fix this." And you know what? I think he always appreciated that, because, he'd come up, he said, "Well, I talked to dispatch, told him quit doing this stuff." And that's old paper log days, But I always liked that. And that wasn't, I didn't come up that on my own. I'd heard that somewhere else, but I thought that was pretty good. When you challenge
what's funny? You know what's funny, guys? There's no way that man could have built an empire of 7,000 trucks if he wasn't compliant. Because if you're not compliant,
there'll be some people out there know who I was talking about, but I always had a lot of respect for the man. We wasn't in the business trying to put nobody out of business back in those days. We worked with them to try to get it straight, and we need to do more of that. When the agency has one tool, and the only tool they have in their toolbox is a hammer, the agency loses respect for the industry. But I tell this story. I had a guy down there in Memphis that hauled mail, and they were running mail out of Philadelphia to Dallas, and I forget exactly how they was doing it, but this back under the 10-hour rule, the 10-hour driving rule, 11-hour driving rule. And I got a complaint. One of the drivers called and complained to me. So I went down there, stopped by there one day. I said, "I want to look at this run. It's Philadelphia, Dallas." They had run team from Memphis to Philadelphia, from Philadelphia back to Memphis, and then they run single to Dallas.
Right.
Well, by trying to make that work, it wouldn't work. That driver come in Philadelphia, that team driver, when he got to Memphis, he didn't have enough hours to get to Dallas. So anyway, I talked to him about it. I said, "This ain't going to work." And he said, "Well, do you think there's any way it will?" We studied. I bet I sat there with him 2 hours trying to figure out how it'd work. It wouldn't work, because, you had to do your sleeper berth splits and stuff. And sleeper split wouldn't work, because once he got to Memphis, he didn't have that. What is it, Dallas? About 10 hours out of Memphis?
Yeah, it's about 10 hours, about 450 miles.
Good. So I said, "Now look, Bill," I said, "I'm going to give you a chance to fix this. That's all I do. I got to complain, got to do something, got to write a report, and you're going to fix it." He said, "I will." Well, 6 months later, I thought, I'll drop by there one day and see how he's running that thing. Well, I did, and that's back when I was in Jackson, and he hadn't changed a thing. Run it just like he run it. And I went ahead and made an enforcement case on him, fined him $10,000. But you know what? He said later on, in later years, he said, "I deserved that." He said, "You tried to help me, and it didn't work." So what he had to do actually was, put a driver in Memphis to do the Dallas run. But anyway, I always thought that meant a lot to me, because, he could got all mad and stuff, but we talked about it. We explained. I tried to help him. It wouldn't work. Not the way he's trying to do it. And we need to do more of that. And we don't. And then I think some of these enforcement actions I see now, they're just almost for nothing. They can't find anything now at a carrier. So they find a carrier. I got one other day I saw in here where they find a carrier for being involved in an accident. So, good God.
So Rick,
what are you people doing?
So going back to the personal conveyance issue as well.
Yeah, keep going back to that.
Right. So other than being put out of service, what are some other penalties that they can levy against you if they catch you in violation of using that personal conveyance improperly?
Well, what they'll do is they'll put you out of service for 10 hours, and they'll write you a ticket. Now, Hank Seaton and I, and Chuck, you know Hank real well.
Oh, yeah.
We took one on a couple of years ago down in Pulaski, Tennessee. Our driver was coming out of Alabama, and he run out of hours. His ELD. He run out of hours coming north toward Nashville, I-65. Well, he first pulled off there at last exit in Alabama before you get to the Tennessee line down there, and there wasn't anywhere in there he felt comfortable spending the night. So his next thought was, well, I'll come on up cross in Tennessee, and I'll stop up there at the rest area, and I'll spend the night in the rest area. We get to the rest area, sure enough, and we even looked, me and Hank went and looked at it. There's a sign there that said no overnight parking for trucks. Well, okay, now what am I going to do? All right, I'm going to go on up here to Shady Grove truck stop, which is only 8 miles up there. So he goes on up to Shady Grove, starts at Shady Grove. Only problem was that UI-65 scales I built down there when I was with the government. They didn't have a lot to do. So they pulled him in, checked him, and of course they found him for running over his hours, falsifying his law, because he was showing PC, trying to get on up to a safe place to spend the night. Well, we finally got the case dismissed after having to go to Pulaski two times. And this driver was out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. They had to drive down there 2 times.
Wow.
And we did get it dismissed. We got taken off CSASMS, but we wouldn't have won that case. We couldn't win the case because he was continuing his move in the direction he was going anyway.
So let me ask you something, Rick. What could that, given the circumstances where there was no place to park and he had no choice but to go to the Shady Grove, what could that driver have done legally? Is there anything other than stop on the shoulder of Interstate 65?
He had 2 choices. The first choice was stay there on that last exit in Alabama where he felt unsafe to spend the night. That was his first choice. His second choice was to turn and go back south. Now, he could go back south, and he could come back tomorrow morning. That'd been fine. Yeah. But you cannot continue. You cannot enhance your tomorrow's move.
Can't advance the move.
That's right. You cannot advance your move. I think that's that is the big takeaway here for our listeners to remember, because this is the most confusing thing. You cannot advance your move. It's just cut and dried.
And if you think those guys, here's what my dad always thought. He thought, well, if they catch me, I can explain it. But I'm going to tell you something. They ain't interested in you explaining it. Maybe the guy feels sorry for me. Maybe give me a break. You ain't going to get no break. They're going to look at that ELD. The ELD is going to show where you ran out of hours. It's going to show exactly where you punched that button, PC or off duty, whichever way you do, and annotate it as personal conveyance. It's going to find that. He's going to see that. He don't even have to know it. This software they got now where you transmit your ELD by either email or there's another way to do it. That's how they're doing it. These investigators do not even have to understand the hours of service regulations.
Right. They do it all for them. It's all automatic. The other thing I want to mention is that for any of our listeners, if you're running and you shouldn't be out there because you've run out of hours and you're doing it anyways and something happens, you're in a whole lot of trouble. If God forbid
if something happens, let me tell you what. If something happens bad, you're going to jail.
Bingo. Yeah.
For a long time.
Yeah. Got a homicide, huh?
Truck driving is fun, but it ain't that much.
Always liked it when I used to always like get up in the passenger seat, the driver do my inspection, fill out basic information in my report and stuff. I always like it to open the door and wadded up logbook pages come rolling out the door, you know. So what did I tell you, you know, in paper logs, they made it fit. I tell this story about this driver one time that he come out of Philadelphia somewhere, got down there about Bristol, Tennessee, and he logged off duty. Well, what was it, about 9 hours down the road, over 540 scales. I was checking trucks down there, and he pulls in there, and he's still showing off duty in Bristol, Tennessee, Bristol, Virginia, on I-81 up there, you know. And I said, well, won't you sit down there and log this up like, you know. Old boy sat there and he studied. He'd fill out a logbook page. He'd tear it out, wash it up, throw it away. Finally, he said, this ain't going to fit, is it? I said, no. I said, but you go ahead and log it just like you run it. So he was sitting there, and I said, he has his pencil on his log, and he said, so I've got to log it right here driving from Bristol. He said, but I'm going to be in violation. I said, son, you're in violation. I said, just go ahead and draw the line. And he said, I can't do it. I said, you let me take your pencil, hold your hand and push that pencil across that driving time? He said, would you care too? He just couldn't do it, you know, himself. He was a nice guy. We put him out of service. Could you? So I enjoyed a lot of my inspections out there. I always enjoyed working people. You know, I inspected over 10,000 trucks in my career, and I probably had problems with 2 or 3 hot-headed drivers. And I always thought that was pretty good. And it wasn't me. It was some of them just, you know, and I understood the frustration, you know, that when you're out there like that, you're trying to make a living, you're working hard, and the government's trying to shut you down. That's tough. I always understood that. But I always like to try to tell them, said, look, this ain't the end of the world. Get your break. Take your 10-hour break out here, 8 hours back in those days. You leave out in the morning. You got a $65 fine. You'll forget that money, and let's all go do better as we move on down the road. Most of them understood that.
Right.
Sound advice.
So I'm looking at the time. Rick, we appreciate you for taking time out, working with us through the little technical difficulty to come on here and try to help us understand and explain this personal conveyance conundrum, and also shedding a little light on the adverse driving conditions as well. So if people want to get a hold of you or want to get in contact with you, they just need to reach out through you through NASTIC. Is that correct?
Yeah, NASTIC's the best way to do it. But I mean, I'm not hard to find. I think I've got a website, Rick Gobbell, but I don't do anything with it. Somebody asked me, I was up there at the NASTIC convention a couple weekends ago. You know, the guy said, "You got a card?" And I said, "No, I don't use them." He said, "Won't you use cards?" I said, "I'm afraid somebody will call me." So that's kind of where I am with things.
Once again, Rick, we appreciate you for being so gracious with your time, and like I said, working with us on the technical issue. You know, we couldn't get the video, but at least we got you. You know, we got you here in voice, and we pulled it off. So I appreciate you for taking the time.
That picture of me was scary anyway. I'm glad it didn't work. Okay.
All right, Rick. Have a good evening. Thanks.
Rick, thank you so much.
All right. See you guys.
All right. So, Chuck?
Yeah, Rico, you know what? Before we part company, I just want to say a couple things to our listeners. Number one, if you get caught and you messed up and you know you messed up, the worst thing you can do is try to lie your way out of it. If you know you're wrong, just tell the officer, listen, I messed up. Don't make up some story, because that's all these people hear all day long are stories. If you tell the truth, you'll get off a lot easier. I've seen it myself. Also, I want to, next Tuesday, this is a really important show for everybody, not just truck drivers, but for anybody. We are going to be talking about sleep. And it turns out that our friend, Dean Croak, who is the head analyst over at DAT, is also a sleep expert. Unfortunately, Dean had to become a sleep expert to deal with some loss in his life, where he had lost a couple drivers when he was running a trucking company in Australia. And this was due to these drivers not getting enough rest. So we're going to talk about that next week with Dean Croak, who has actually given over 600 lectures on sleep in his life, and he is an expert on this. So we look forward to that next Tuesday. If anybody wants to get hold of me for anything, whether you're having a challenge with your business, you want to get set up with Traffics, I know lots of people there. So please reach out to me. Best way, I still have a Traffics email address, chuck@traffics.com. Include your phone number in the email address. And as you can probably hear, I am losing my voice, which some people will be very thrilled, but it'll be back strong by next week. And with that, Rico, I'm going to let you back in a hole for another week.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you guys for taking time out to hang out with us. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you took a little time to hang out with us. We're always grateful for you doing so. Please, ladies, it helps if you could like, share, and subscribe to the show. It definitely helps us out, helps us push the videos out to a larger audience. So if you could do that for us, we greatly appreciate it. And until the next time, we want you guys to stay safe out there, stay healthy, keep it in between the mustard and the mayonnaise, and God bless you and good night.
Catch you on the flip-flop. Good night. God bless.